Welcome to another episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, joined as always by my co-host John Sheeran. John, we are gearing up for not only the conclusion of the Bengals season, but we're gearing up for Christmas time. We're gearing up for Star Wars time. Oh, he's got the cap.
I knew I forgot something.
There you go. In all the panic that was the getting set for the show pregame, you forgot the Santa hat. How you doing, bud? We've got Star Wars coming up. We got Christmas around the corner. How you doing? You feeling it? You feeling the spirit?
I'm doing well, and like I told Anthony before the show, I tripped over some wires because I needed to tell my roommates something before the show, and I tripped over wires, but also like stepped on something. I'm like, why did I slip? And I think I just stepped on the Santa hat that I just put on. So I meant to put it on before the show. Then you're talking about Christmas stuff. Like, yep, it has to come on now.
Did you do like the old school cartoon slip on a banana peel type of thing? But it was the same.
Yeah, it had that same animation where like my legs were running under me, like I was like Scooby-Doo chasing away from something.
Well, it's good to talk to you, man. I know we've got a lot on tap tonight, and we're gonna kick off the week leading up to Christmas and or Hanukkah. I think Hanukkah starts same day as Christmas Eve, if I'm not mistaken. So if you celebrate that, happy Hanukkah as well. But the holiday season, we're kicking it off with our show. We're going to talk a little news and notes. There's a lot of things happening. This 1-13 team really knows how to keep things interesting. So we're gonna talk about that. John and I are going to engage in a little debate regarding Joe Mixon and his long-term future with the team. And we'll kind of see how that goes. We'll be joined in about 20 to 30 minutes by Billy Gomila and the Valley Shook, which is the SB Nation LSU blog. He's going to continue our 2020 prospect watch as we look at Joe Burrow. We've already looked at Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. We did that last week on an extended version of the podcast. So we think this is well timed to bring him on, given that Joe Burrow just won the Heisman. So we're excited to have him on, and then we'll conclude the show with our all-decade team, seeing as how sadly this decade is coming to a close. We're going to start with some of our picks for the Bengals all-decade team, which I assume, John, this is your baby. I assume that means 2010 through 2019, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
We will be doing that and getting out of here. But I'm already talking about getting out of here. We haven't even started yet. Let's talk some news and notes. I guess we can start here, John. Let's talk AJ Green. On our last listener questions episode, we were asked, what's the deal? What's the deal? And it seems like every time we do a listener questions episode, that's the prevailing question. What is going on with AJ Green? Well, he saw a foot specialist. It sounds as if he's not going to see the field. I mean, who knows at this point definitively, but it sounds like in all likelihood he is not going to see the field at all this year. Now there's the looking to the future and what's ahead for the contract negotiations for AJ Green. He said there's kind of some conflicting comments and all this kind of stuff. I guess, I'll take the franchise tag. I want the long-term deal. I don't know. There's a lot to sift out here. What are you making of all of this?
So I think he said that when he got back from meeting Dr. Robert Anderson, who was the foot specialist, he sought out last year when he was dealing with the foot injury that took him out for half the year. He sought out this meeting. This was like a pre-planned meeting, according to Paul Dehner Jr., and about how he was just checking up on the progress of his foot. And the fact of the matter is, if you're seeing a foot specialist 2 games left to go and you haven't played at all during the season, the odds of you playing for the remaining 2 games is very slim at best. So then he said when he got back on Tuesday to Jeff Hobson, I'm probably not going to play the last 2 games. And then today, Wednesday, before their Week 16 match with the Dolphins, he said, yeah, I'm just not going to play the next 2 games. He basically definitively said that. For some reason, the Bengals are not putting him on IR, or they're just keeping him on the active roster, listing him as out on the injury report. And then there was a report from Tyler Dragon of the Inquirer saying that if they don't come into terms of the deal, they're not going to let him hit free agency. They're going to put the franchise tag on him. AJ's response to that was like, I understand that because, I haven't played in a year and a half basically, and I'm 32 years old and whatnot. And I understand the business side of it, but you also have to understand that I didn't go through all this. I didn't make sure that I was, not ready to come back 100% just to play under the franchise tag, because that's more financial insecurity that AJ doesn't want to go through. He didn't want to play through an injury that could potentially hinder his final big deal. And that was a talking point that he also mentioned when talking to reporters this week, and how this last deal, he's going to turn 32 years old next year. And if he signs a deal, it's probably going to be the last major multi-year extension with, guaranteed money up in the tens of millions of dollars. So he wants to be right for it. He wants to be 100%. He wants to make sure that when he steps onto the field, he's not worrying about renagging that injury and hindering his financial security going forward. So I understand his headspace here. I understand why he wouldn't want to play on the tag, because after going through what he's gone through over the past year and a half, there's no reason for him to play on just a 1-year deal, albeit a fully guaranteed deal. But it makes total sense why he would want to preserve himself through OTAs, through training camp, because there's no reason why he did all this to sacrifice, all that current pay for the future pay, and then to not end up with any future pay at all. So I do think that they're probably going to tag him, but I do think that if, they don't use the tag that often. And what we see throughout the NFL nowadays is that when a player gets tagged, more times than not, they'll come to an agreement before training camp starts. And I believe that is something that we can expect in Cincinnati with AJ Green, because I do think that both sides still want to get a deal. But obviously, you have to understand both sides. You understand why the Bengals would want to tag AJ Green, because he hasn't played that much in the past 2 years. He is getting that old, up there in age. But you also understand why AJ wouldn't want to put himself in that situation after what he's gone through the past year.
So here's an interesting comment by Joel Rampello in our live Facebook chat. By the way, thanks for joining us live for those of you who are joining us live. And if you are getting the show after the fact, please do join us live if and when you're able. But he says, I feel betrayed by AJ. And I guess I understand some of that sentiment a little bit, just because it's been so wishy-washy this year in terms of will play, won't play. And some people think that, he's maybe milking this because of the business side. I mean, whatever. But I would not feel betrayed, because AJ Green has made it clear, John, through this process, that even though he doesn't want the franchise tag and he wants a long-term deal, he wants to stay in Cincinnati. So, I mean, that to me shows doesn't show betrayal. That should show that he's loyal to this team, and a team that's the worst in the league right now in terms of its record. So, to me, I don't understand the betrayal side feeling of that. And, to his credit, and I think a little bit to what you said there, John, I think AJ Green said that, he'll take the tag, but he's not going to show up for off-season stuff. If that's his thing. And I think it's because he doesn't want to risk further injury on a risky deal.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason why he didn't play 100% this year, because he's on a 1-year deal, and then you're putting him on another 1-year deal. He's not going to impose himself any different. He's going to have the same mentality: until I have financial security, I'm not putting myself at risk. And like you said, his message throughout this entire process, at least from his side, has always been clear. He was always like, I'm not coming back until I'm 100%. The one time he did practice, he did think he was close to coming back. He did think he was ready to come back. When he had that setback, when he had that swelling in his ankle, he shut himself back down again, put himself back on the rehab. There's no reason to feel like AJ's not loyal to this team, because another thing that he said, he keeps reiterating, I want to stay here. I want to make a legacy here. I want to stay with one team. I want to break all the records. This is something that we've known for years now. Like, this is, again, we've talked about this on multiple shows last time, and I don't think the fans are quite getting this. This is the same AJ Green that we've come to know and love. He has the same mentality for this team, for this organization, but he understands that he can't put himself at risk. And that's a thing that I don't think a lot of fans realize. These are still human beings worrying about their own financial security. And it's all relative, because he's made, tens of millions of dollars over the course of his career, and he's had a very successful career. But this is his last chance to really get a big payday, and he's being very smart about it to make sure that he does end up getting that payday. So his message has always been consistent. It's been the same. So there's no reason to feel that betrayal, because betrayal implies that something is shocking, something, it's like a change of events, it's a change of narrative, and we've had none of that from his side.
Right. I expect, and it is, I tweeted this out, I expect the Bengals to, especially if for some reason they do not get a deal done in what's left of December, January, and February, I expect them to use the franchise tag on him, even if temporarily, to parlay it into a long-term deal. And they should. If they were not going to trade him at the deadline this last year, you have to expect that this was kind of how things were going to progress or devolve, however you want to look at it. If you're not going to trade him at the deadline and your plan is to hang on to him, you're going to try and work out a deal that makes sense for both sides, but it may take a temporary usage of the franchise tag. And if things get way out of control in terms of we're too far apart on a deal, then maybe you explore a trade to get something in return by placing the franchise tag on him. Before we move on, John, to some more news and notes for the Cincinnati Bengals, what would you think is kind of, as we sit at this point in the or heading to the offseason, what do you think is kind of a fair deal-ish? I mean, ballpark for AJ Green. That's he says he's got 4 or 5 elite years left. Personally speaking, I see a 3-year contract, maybe an incentive laden that he can make a lot of money. That kind of makes sense for me. I don't know about you. What do you think?
There's no question that his value has diminished, and he can't feel happy about that. And it makes all the more sense why he would want to make sure he gets whatever deal he can get. And I still think that, in a sense, there is some leverage on his side because of the way the Bengals have, dug into the sand that we're not trading you, we're not letting you go, we want to come to a deal. So it's not going to be upwards towards 20 million, which I think where the market is going for receivers, because those are specifically receivers in their mid 20s going into their second contract. It's not going to be what we saw from Michael Thomas or even Odell Beckham Jr. for that matter. It's going to be somewhere, I think, a little bit more than what he made in his first extension back in 2015 in that 15 million range. It's going to be, I would say, in the 16 to 18 million range. I think it's just a slight raise from what he got, but not necessarily a raise considering the increase in the salary cap and where the market for the position is, because he is honest. This is going to be his third contract now. He is entering his age 32 season. He is coming off of 2 injuries that have incapacitated him for the past 1.5 seasons. All those factors play in, and he realizes that his value to an extent has shaken, but they're not going to give him less than one he originally made. So it's not going to be where the market is, but it's not going to be less than 15 million. So it's going to be, I think, in that 16 to 17, maybe 4 years. I think 3 is the common guess that's going on right now. And a guaranteed percentage of maybe around like 40%, like you said, with a lot of incentives. They like to make sure that those contracts are front loaded, so they get the guaranteed money out of the way early. And I think that's going to be the same case for AJ.
Yeah, and I think he's going to want that. I think he's going to want that guaranteed money up front. Given what's transpired the past few years for him in terms of injuries. Quickly, Cincinnati only had one, actually somewhat surprising in the positive way. Cincinnati only had one Pro Bowl designee in Geno Atkins. It's statistically one of his lower end seasons, but kind of had some other stats and whatnot behind the scenes that showed that doesn't paint the whole picture if you kind of look at the major areas. But Geno Atkins makes the Pro Bowl. 8 Pro Bowls, the most by any Bengals defensive player. Your thoughts on him, his season, and his making the Pro Bowl?
Since I think week 6, when people started freaking out about where's Geno Atkins, his impact has been marginal or just not noticeable. He's been, I think, in the top 5 or 6 in terms of pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, for starting defensive interior players. So, and he's maintained that status all the way up until week 14. So I think he got in mostly because of the coaches and players, not necessarily from the fan votes. So we got a lot of help from that. And obviously the fan votes, they go for the more bigger name guys like Aaron Donald and such. But his production has been borderline Pro Bowl level this year. And you think for a team that's 1-13 on one of the worst defenses in the NFL, there's not a lot of Pro Bowl talent there, but he's still playing at a high level. And it's hard because for the most part of the season, the Bengals have been down. They haven't been able to rush the pass that much. I think both him and Carlos Dunlap's pass rushing snaps have been down relative to their more successful years, and that's been a problem for the past 3 or 4 years so as well. So the sack totals haven't gotten back to that 2015 point for him or Carlos Dunlap, who's also, in my opinion, having a Pro Bowl year. He's been on fire for the past 4 years, and I kind of wrote about that today on CincyJungle.com. But I think both of them have been very good this year, and it's glad to see at least one of them get a Pro Bowl nod. And obviously, Geno is the guy that is more familiar with the process. This is his 8th Pro Bowl. Definitely well-deserved. He's not going to make the All-Pro, and he probably doesn't deserve that distinction because I think there's definitely a handful of guys that are more worthy of that honor this year. But I do think, looking beyond sacks, the pressure rates, the pass rush win rates, according to ESPN.com, that's the new stat that they're tracking. He's all in the high-end spectrum there. So definitely when you look beyond just the traditional stats, he's still having a Pro Bowl season, even on a bad team.
Yeah, eighth Pro Bowl for Geno Atkins, probably on pace to make the Hall of Fame, or should be, given at least his statistics and those Pro Bowl nods. Joe Mixon was a 5th alternate at running back. Safety Brandon Wilson was a 2nd alternate as a returner. I like what you said about Dunlap. I think that the last month, he's been an insane player in terms of Pro Football Focus metrics and statistics that you can readily see. Just a great month of football for him. So those are some news and notes we wanted to touch on before we get to some other things. Those are some of the happenings with the Cincinnati Bengals. AJ Green contract talk, as well as the Bengals having a Pro Bowl player going forward in Geno Atkins. Let's move on, John, for a little bit of a debate. We've got about 10, 15 minutes before our special guest comes on. So let's talk about one of the guys that was an alternate for the Cincinnati Bengals in running back Joe Mixon. He has been another player who has really picked up his game over the past handful of weeks. He's had 3 100-yard rushing performances in the past 6 weeks, including 2 of his highest single-game rushing totals in his career the past couple of weeks. So he has been running really well. Some of it has to do with better scheming. Some of it has to do with his will. I mean, he is showing. There's a couple of plays last week, a couple of plays against the Browns, just broken plays where he has made something out of nothing, and he continues to do that. Here's the debate I want to talk about, John, because obviously there is a real stark line in the sand here. There is the, Joe Mixon, productive player, still young, seems to have a lot of tread left on the tires, if you will. And then there's also you don't give a running back a second contract. I know there are pros and cons to each. I know you've been a little bit more, and I don't want to paint you in a corner necessarily, but I know you've been a little bit of late in the, hey, Joe Mixon's producing, but it's not leading to wins. It's not leading to points. I kind of wanted to engage in this debate a little bit as to what do the Bengals do long-term at running back and with Joe Mixon. He seems to be one of their best, continually one of their best offensive players and still produces despite the injuries. But we know the issue of paying running backs as they approach 30 and as they get more touches. So I guess I will say, what is your take in terms of the cons of the Bengals looking at extending Joe Mixon long-term? Because his rookie contract's coming up too.
Yeah, and there's always 2 sides to the coin here. And just to preface this, he has been amazing this year. He's specifically since the bye weeks, since they changed that whole blocking scheme and the running style. They've formatted this offense to fit his strengths, which they should have done in the beginning to properly evaluate the personnel that they had. But anyways, they got around to it, and they've made this offense work for him. And he's had, I think, over 600 rushing yards since the bye week. He's on pace for over 1,000 yards, which it's kind of an arbitrary benchmark to hit, but it's something that people will eat up. Most importantly, he's avoiding tackles and breaking tackles and getting yards after contact at a much higher rate than he has over the course of his career. I think he's had, over 3 games now with at least 5 broken tackles. He's been a very much more elusive runner, and you can look at no better example than that running against the Patriots he had in the backfield, breaking 3 or 4 tackles, going off for a 29-yard run. He's been one of the best running backs in the NFL over the past month. Unfortunately, though, since the bye week, in his over 100 rushing attempts and 600 yards, he's producing on average about 0.00149 expected points added per play. Now, in layman's terms, is basically his massive production, his efficiency, which has definitely increased, has unfortunately not put the Bengals in optimal positions to score the ball compared to just passing the ball on average. So despite how great Mixon has been playing, despite how much better he's looked in this offense, the offense is still averaging only 14.5 points a game. And it shows that no matter how good your running game is, no matter how much improved it is, no matter how much you can build the entire offense around the running game, it's not going to make it that much better unless you have a transcendent and unique offense like the Ravens. Right now, the Ravens are by and far away the most efficient running game in the NFL. They're the only offense that's averaging more than 0.1 expected points added per rush. Basically, all the other decent rushing offenses are kind of clustered in the same way. And the only thing that's differentiating those teams kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of rushing is just passing efficiency. And passing efficiency is still the one, differentiating factor that determines the good teams from the mediocre teams. So you can't be a great team just by rushing the ball alone. And that's why in general principle, it's not wise to financially, accumulate all this money to pay one running back. And that's the argument against Joe Mixon. The other argument, though, is that he is only, I think, 23 years old. And this is potentially a team that's going into, a salary cap situation where you don't have to pay a quarterback a lot of money. When you have a starting quarterback on a rookie salary, then it opens up a lot of cap space for, that running back's money. But in general, general principles about building a team, it's never wise to pay that much money towards a player that doesn't have that much of a positive impact on you scoring points and ultimately winning games. And despite how good Joe Mixon is, despite how whatever superlative you want to say about his talent, his overall impact does not have the same effect as I think the perception of it is, despite how talented he is and despite how much more efficient he has become.
So one thing I want to bring up that kind of goes kind of my counterpoints here. One thing that goes in your corner, if you look at these numbers here, these statistics are for Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is currently 27 years old, so he's not old necessarily by league standards, maybe up there a little bit in terms of running back age. He's got basically, four more seasons, well, 3 more seasons actually than Mixon because he sat out 2018. But you look at what Bell did with the Steelers and what is happening this year. And you can say, obviously blocking is a big scheme, blocking, talent around him on the Jets, all of that. But age, right? I mean, if you look at the ages here, that's kind of the thing, right, John? I mean, the right around that 27, 28 years old, that's when running backs start to, get a little bit of that decline. And you can see here the emboldened, and this is courtesy of Pro Football Reference, the emboldened rushing attempts in 2017. It means he was up there in leading the league, touches 406. That wears a guy down. Now Mixon, does split carries a little bit with Gio Bernard. So that limits it a little bit, but he's been getting the lion's share of the carries as of late. So, that's one thing to think about. Would you? Well, we'll get to that. Let me bring up some counterpoints here. And I love that you brought up some of the analytics and they make sense. They point to it, and it is risky to bring, it is risky to think about signing a running back for a 3-year contract, 4-year contract beyond their rookie deal. Like what you're seeing from Bell. That's why I brought him up. It's risky. He signed the big deal with the Jets and it's not paying off for him. And I really thought he would have been a good weapon for them. But, I look at what his effort level. I look at kind of the things you can't really gauge by some of the metrics, some of the statistics. He's talking about, I hope AJ Green is a teammate. He tweeted this out. I hope AJ Green remains a teammate for life with me, with the Bengals. He does a lot of things with the team in the community. He has his own foundation, or he works with other foundations rather. He in a 1-win season exudes effort, and he's really taken the leadership mantle. And I have to give him credit. I don't like to bring this whole thing up because I think it's in the past, but the ugly incident of him in college, he has seemingly moved far beyond that and has been a stark contrast from that behavior that we saw a handful of years ago. And he's been really a model teammate, model citizen. And, he's a guy that has been a valuable member of this team. And yeah, they're not yielding points. His production isn't necessarily yielding points, but I think that he has been a guy that has remained productive on this team's offense when the weapons are extremely limited. There's, the injuries have piled up and he's still getting 100 yards when they're stacking the box. He's still able to do that and create things out of nothing, create things out of this behind this poor offensive line. And I think that says something. And I also think, John, additionally, I think that if you have a change at quarterback, if you have pieces that are healthy and Zach Taylor's offense running the way it should, where you utilize play action, he is doing his part. I have a post going up about Andy Dalton's scheme potentially showing more weaknesses of Andy Dalton, Zach Taylor's scheme showing more weaknesses of Andy Dalton because of what's asked of him at quarterback. What's being done is right now, Joe Mixon is creating yards and production to set up the play action, and the passing game should be there. And it's not there, and I think that he could be a key going forward if you use him the right way to set up the play action, which is what Zach Taylor wants out of this system. I see you grimacing. So obviously I said something dumb.
I grimace because the run sets up the pass in terms of play action has been debunked, and I feel like that's still a narrative that we've yet to fully encompass as truth. And I agree. Like, there's a lot of people commenting about, Joe Mixon's a team first guy. We gotta honor his loyalty. We gotta respect the fact of the teammate that he does, and we have to reward him for the type of teammate that he is. And you're right. He's said and done all the right things since he got to Cincinnati. He's been a model teammate. He's been a model player. He's someone that you want to have in your locker room. But in terms of just putting on the GM's cap and just thinking about, we have a limited amount of salary cap space. We have to make sure that we put the best team out there, and we have to realize that despite all the talent and all the extraordinary abilities that he has, that doesn't really separate him from other running backs in terms of just winning football games. And it's a very cold-blooded, pencil-pushing approach, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but it's the reality of the situation. And time again, we see teams who sign these running backs to multi-year contracts and just don't yield the returns that they expect to, because they realize that rushing production in terms of just overall efficiency is not that hard to emulate in terms of finding similar talents later in the draft and just able to plug out these running backs and limit their shelf lives and just run them into the ground and just go on and get the next one. So again, it's not diminishing who Joe Mixon is as a talent, as a person, or anything. It's just the fact that he plays a position that unfortunately doesn't yield positive results when you pump further investment in them, regardless of any extraordinary talents that he has. Because unfortunately, running back is the one position where you could be as talented as ever, but in the modern NFL and today's NFL, when passing is king, it just doesn't mean that much as it used to.
Good point, John. If we're gonna get to our special guest here in just a second, before we do, just kind of to put a bow on this Joe Mixon debate, what would make you? Because you mentioned free agency, what the Bengals do, what they don't do in free agency. This team operates differently in free agency. We've talked about that till they're blue in the face. You mentioned salary cap space. Usually, what they spend that salary cap space on is their own valued guys. So, chances are this would be one of those quote unquote core guys that they re-sign. What would make you comfortable in terms of a scenario to kind of finalize this, this conversation? Would it be, franchise tag, short-term deal and move on from there? Would it be, kind of what we talked about with AJ Green, a 3-year deal, move on after that? Would it be don't re-sign him at all based on things? What would make you the most comfortable, as you said, putting on your Santa /GM hat?
It would be investing in Rodney Anderson and Travion Williams and using Giovanni Bernard, who you already paid. Like it's gonna be an impasse, because if I were forced to hand Joe Mixon an extension, it would be slightly larger than what Giovanni Bernard's getting paid. He's getting paid $5.5 million per year. Joe Mixon's going to want more than that. Every time a running back gets a multi-year deal, like Ezekiel Elliott or David Johnson, he congratulates them. He puts the eye emojis. He's going to want the biggest bag there is to be handed out for a running back. And maybe a team is going to give it to him. Like the Jets were the one that gave it to Le'Veon Bell. I don't think the Bengals are going to be the one to give it to Joe Mixon, but I do believe that is the money that he's going to be looking for, and that's not the money that I would be comfortable paying him. Another team can be the first team to successfully sign a running back to a second contract and get the results that they want from him. And I just don't think it would be wise for the Bengals to try to be that first team, especially after already paying Giovanni Bernard, especially having these running backs already in the room. You can scheme a running back positive results no matter where you invest in him. I just don't think it'd be smart to do with Joe Mixon.
Well, that'll wrap it up for now. It's a decision the Bengals don't need to make, fortunately, for a little while yet. but it is something that's coming down the pike with Joe Mixon. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're going to get to our special guest in just a second here. If you are new to this show, please join us live via YouTube on the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel or the Cincy Jungle Facebook live video feed. All of our stuff is on Cincy Jungle. You can also get the audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio. Get it where you can. You can also get all of our stuff on YouTube and, as I mentioned, cincyjungle.com. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we have been doing some 2020 prospect previews, prospect watch. Last week we did. We had a couple of guests on to help us preview Tua Tagovailoa as well as Justin Herbert, and now we've got Billy Gomila from And the Valley Shook, which is SB Nation's LSU blog. Billy, how are you? Can you hear us?
Yes, Kenny, I'm fine. Everything's good. Doing great.
Yeah, well, thanks for making the time. I know you got a lot going on. It's the holidays and whatnot. I wouldn't have probably pushed you to come on this week if it weren't for the fact that Joe Burrow just won the Heisman Trophy and did so in record-setting votes. So we appreciate the time. I'm just going to start off kind of easy, I guess, easy-ish question, which is one that we have asked the other special guests to when they've helped us preview other exciting prospects. There are many exciting traits about Joe Burrow: pocket presence, leadership, accuracy, all of that. What would you say is his greatest asset as he looks to move into the NFL?
You know, the biggest thing for him this year, and it was the thing that I already felt that he had, he's a great decision maker, and he's always kind of just been really in command of LSU from kind of the first time he stepped in. You know, first game, coming in as a transfer, Miami kind of starts a pregame scuffle, and Burrow was right up in the middle of it. You know, and then immediately talking trash to them about how about to kick their butt, and even when he was kind of struggling that first year. He had this knack for playing a game that would make you come away, not necessarily knowing the stats, having watched it live and think, oh, he played pretty well. And then you look at the stats and he was right around 50% completions, or sometimes even under it. But you still felt like he played well because he would kind of just run the offense and keep things going. You know, he took a long time to throw his first interception. He would throw balls away when they need to be thrown away. He would, take sacks in a situation where it was like, well, taking a sack is better than putting the ball up for grabs. Things like that, And this summer, I think when I previewed the team, I said, well, here's the thing. We know he's got the intangibles. We know he's a tough kid. We know he's a leader. All that kind of stuff. It's what kind of, where's his ceiling in the tangible department as a passer? And then he really just took off. I was pretty confident that he would play well this year, that they would do well. I certainly never saw him coming out completing, 76, 77% of his passes and throwing for, damn near 50 touchdowns. I never saw that in my wildest dreams. And it's one thing he's going to have, I think, that's going to serve him best in the NFL is that he's got a professional mindset. And he's a great decision maker, and he is always just kind of in command and in control of himself.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really expected that monumental jump in production from sub 60% completion percentage to the NCAA record in completion percentage. And I think obviously the number one thing people attribute that to is the hiring of Joe Brady to really turn over that entire offensive scheme. And just from someone who hasn't fully watched LSU season and who hasn't been following them from week one, what has been the biggest difference in terms of what Brady has done to that offense? And not necessarily do you believe that all of Burrow's success has been attributed to Brady, but what's really been like the biggest thing that has helped him, transform that offense? What's been the biggest differences between last year and this year's, construction of the offense?
Well, the biggest thing is they just completely committed to the idea of, okay, we're going to be an up-tempo, no-huddle spread team. You know, LSU spends almost the entire game in the shotgun. They've been able to be a high tempo team. They don't sub very much. They kind of just lean on what they've got and they go. And we saw that in the spring game, and it was like, well, that looks different, all right. You know, whereas last year they used more spread sets, more three receiver sets, but they still went under center. They still used a little I formation. They still used a lot of tight end looks. You know, it was still kind of in between what LSU had done before and what I think Ed Orgeron wanted them to be. And then I think Brady helped kind of bring them those next couple steps. And he and Steve Ensminger, who was already here, just had a great relationship and worked really well together. And it all just kind of came together. It was the right situation with you know, the receivers kind of ascending. You had the right kind of just the moons all kind of lines. You even had a running back who was kind of more of a fit for that kind of offense, more of a scat back, a guy who you get in space and throw the ball to.
Talking with Billy Gomila, head honcho over at And the Valley Shook, the SB Nation LSU blog, helping us preview Joe Burrow as we continue our 2020 prospect watch. Billy, this is where I think there are a couple of points of contention for how great Burrow has looked, for how great the stats are, the record-breaking Heisman votes, all of that. There are a couple of points of contention in terms of his NFL trajectory. I think one of them has to be how close he is. He a player that is just hitting his stride, or is he a player, and what we've seen, who is very close to what his NFL ceiling is or can be? Like, is he still a developing player because of this 1 year wonder type of thing, or 1+ year wonder type of thing? Or, you know, is he maxing out as he's entering the league? He is a little bit older than, you know, a Baker Mayfield, a Lamar Jackson who came in before him.
I would say physically, sure. I mean, yeah, he's never going to be the guy who is just going to overwhelm you with physical traits. And his physical traits are better than I think people probably realize. He's certainly a better athlete than people realize. He's probably a better runner than even what LSU's used him for. They really haven't had to use him very much as a runner this year. But yeah, it's not a case where he's just slap on another 10, 15 pounds of muscle, you know. Physically, he's definitely, I think, on the high end. And physically, it would have been my question coming into this year as far as his NFL bona fides. Does he really have the kind of arm to make the big time throws that you need to make in the NFL? But I'll say this, for this year, he's been able to do that. He's been able to throw, you know, those touch passes over the middle, over the linebackers, but in front of the safeties. He's really been able to just drill slants into some tight coverage. Last year we saw he could do, and I hate to use the Drew Brees comparison, you know, just because it's Drew freaking Brees, but the thing that he could do that Drew Brees has done better than any quarterback I've ever seen is throw that back shoulder throw down the sideline when the defensive back's a little bit on the over the top of the receiver. You throw it just kind of behind him, and the receiver can just turn and get the ball. And Drew Brees has made a living being able to do that down the sidelines and then being able to do that down the seams. And right away we can see, okay, well, that's a throw that Joe can make pretty regularly. And this year, he you know, they took that, but then he goes on to it so much. He's been a great deep ball thrower. He's been able to, you know, just lay it out there and let guys run underneath it. He's been able to make big crossing routes a staple of this offense. He's been able to really just drill those slants in. And, you know, this hasn't been an offense that's lived on just dinking and dunking and throwing short. They've thrown short, they've thrown long, they've thrown intermediate. They've kind of done a little bit of everything. And when you chart Burrow's throws, he really makes each one fairly regularly. I don't know that there's a throw this year that's been a weakness for him.
So the Washington professional football team did something really smart in this past draft, and they paired Dwayne Haskins, their quarterback, with Terry McLaurin, the receiver, both from Ohio State, And obviously, Haskins hasn't had a lot of success, but when he's had the most success, when he's thrown to McLaurin, who's been one of the best rookie receivers in the NFL. The LSU's got a couple of good receivers who are also draft eligible, Jamar Chase and Jefferson, I think. So in terms of, keeping Burrow with one of his receivers, who's out of those two guys is the guy that you want to see follow Burrow to the same team? Who do you think he can have the most success with in the professional game?
Well, only one of them's actually draft eligible right now. Chase is a sophomore, so he'll have another year. But Justin Jefferson will be draft eligible, and I imagine will go out. It's funny. Earlier in the year, and certainly in that first year, Justin Jefferson, who is, of course, was the brother of Jordan Jefferson and Ricky Jefferson, who played at LSU, and really wasn't a very heralded recruit. We saw really quickly, like, oh, well, all he does is just get open and catch the ball. He's not real flashy. You never saw him make a lot of just crazy plays after the catch, and he's not super physically imposing. He's not small by any stretch, but he's only about 6'2", buck 95, maybe 200 pounds. This year, especially early on, you saw really quickly, like, man, he and Joe are just dialed in together. Joe can just toss it up to him whenever he needs to play. Jefferson's making play after play after play. He makes the big 3rd and 17 catch against Texas, and then breaks a tackle and just takes it to the house. He's beating guys deep. He's beating guys short. He's beating guys every which way. And then from somewhere about maybe the 4th or 5th game, Jamar Chase really took over. And he always, he was a huge recruit. LSU fought off a lot of teams to get him. And the difference is he kind of just has a more well-rounded game. He's not huge, but he's about 6'1", 6'2", 200 pounds. He will not be denied on a jump ball. He makes plays after the catch with quickness. He'll bully guys. He's a really smooth route runner. And then he's shown more speed than I thought he had coming into this year. Just consistently making plays. Against Vanderbilt, he had 2 long touchdowns on, just little quick slant plays over the middle. Against Florida, he beats his guy deep on a straight go route and for the game-icing touchdown. And Bama, he just abused Trevon Diggs, who people say is supposed to be a first-round draft pick. I'm a little skeptical of that after watching him against LSU. But, Chase had him all day, whichever way he wanted. He was able to, wall him off for balls with his body. He was able to go up over him when he had to. And when he had separation, he made a play after the catch. And he won the Bolitnikoff Award, and he deserved it this year, and I imagine he'll be a very high draft pick in the 2021 draft.
Talking with Billy Gomila of And the Valley Shook, SB Nation's LSU blog. We'll be talking with him for just another minute here. We're getting, some questions in our live chats from listeners. I guess we'll kind of try to blend a couple of them here. Basically, I don't know how familiar you are with the offense that Zach Taylor's attempting to run and or the Rams-ish offense. But basically, an overarching theme that we're getting from some of our live listeners is what can Joe Burrow bring in that style of offense, and namely to the Cincinnati Bengals, given his skill set? I mean, you mentioned, maybe some limitations on the arm strength, but great decision-making skills, all of that. And you said he makes all the throws. I mean, how do you see that potential marriage playing out in terms of Burrow's skill set and what the Bengals want to do on offense?
Well, I can't speak a lot to what the Bengals do this year, but I did get to see the Rams in person twice last year against the Saints. And, the thing that impressed me about them with Sean McVay and Jared Goff is McVay found a way to fit what he wanted to do to what Jared Goff did well. And I think he figured out, and I think
do we lose him?
He's not used to reading NFL type defenses. So how do I make that easy for him? We're going to run a lot of play action. We're going to do a lot of shifts. We're going to do a lot of different stuff that's going to make the defense declare itself and give him easy decisions, and that's going to work for him. Yeah, I don't know if it's a long-term plan, but it worked for him, for the last 2 years. I think if you put a guy like Burrow in an offense like that, he's absolutely going to shred because he can make the decisions. The easier you make it for him, I think we've seen this year, the more he can maximize what everybody around him can do.
So I think the main concern that Bengals fans have with not only investing in quarterback with the first overall pick is the whole perception about the Bengals and itself and the state of their franchise right now. And say they draft a quarterback first overall, what's his reaction going to be coming into a franchise that is not very successful? It's very much in a purgatory. It's very much in a bad shape. And the main concern would be, if the quarterback comes in here and maybe doesn't really buy into what they're selling, doesn't buy into the whole process of starting anew and bringing a different culture to Cincinnati. Can you kind of speak upon just the Joe Burrow that you've come to know and the type of personality that he is and his willingness to overcome adversity and the type of, the character that he is to be willing to come into a bad situation and do the best that he can to kind of turn it around?
Well, I don't blame your Bengals fans for feeling that way, just based on what I know of the franchise from the last few years. Joe Burrow kind of came to LSU. He was never really promised the job, even though that's what he was looking for in terms of, he left Ohio State. He wanted to go somewhere where he could play. And LSU was kind of in a situation where they weren't quite ready to turn the ball over to their next quarterback yet. They had, they were going to be stuck with some younger guys. The idea of having someone that had a little more experience, was a little more developed, was more what they wanted to do. And I think they wanted to open things up a little bit, but they weren't. I don't want to say they didn't know how to. I don't think they were fully vested in what they needed to do yet, and fully confident in their ability to do it yet. And Joe came in here coming from a spread offense. He talked about how he had to kind of reteach himself how to take a snap from center, and he wasn't used to having to drop back and turn his back on the defense on a play action thing, things like that. And you never heard him complain. You never heard him really say anything negative. He kind of just embraced it. He embraced this team really quickly. I only recently found out that very quickly there were some veterans on that 2018 team who kind of were like, who's this kid who's coming in here and thinks he's going to jump the line and take a starting job? And they had to be a little bit of a team meeting, and Joe kind of had to stand up and say, look, I'm here to win football games, and if you guys have a problem with it, let's get this out. And eventually he just won them over just by being himself. So I think he's a guy who is definitely going to bring a pro mindset to the NFL, which I've been lucky enough to interview a lot of football players over the years, and a lot of guys that have gone on to very successful pro careers. And the one thing that I take away from it is the guys who are the most successful for the longest time, the ones who can very much treat it like the way any of us treat any other job, is that you go into work, you do your work, you devote yourself to being the best player you could be. And I think we've seen that Joe Burrow will do that.
Talking with Billy Gomila of SB Nations and the Valley Shook, their LSU website. He's the head guy over there. Billy, before we get you out of here, I know my co-host hates doing these, but do you have a pro comparison? We've heard Carson Wentz. Todd McShay recently said he heard some NFL scouts call him Andy Dalton, which was a very interesting analogy. Some people say a taller Drew Brees. I don't know. What do you have a pro comparison or someone that he reminds you of in terms of his play?
I definitely would see Carson Wentz didn't make a lot of sense to me, because to me Carson Wentz was a guy who more physically jumped off the page a bit, because he was a big, strong guy, playing at that smaller level at North Dakota. Drew Brees kind of works in that he's a better athlete than you probably think he is. Obviously, he's a little taller. Matt Ryan's not a bad comparison. Obviously, Matt Ryan's not much of a runner, but if you've ever seen the Falcons in person a lot, he is a guy that can get out the pocket, buy time, and that's kind of how I would describe Burrow's mobility a little more. let me think. Maybe somebody like Jared Goff in terms of, a little bit of mobility, tall guy. He doesn't have that kind of an arm quite like Goff, but Drew Brees is probably the closest comparison I can think of in terms of being accurate, not necessarily being the guy who can power the ball into any window, but somehow still makes every throw that you could ask him to. Whether he's got Drew Brees' overall ability to just be a machine for almost 20 years now, I don't know about that, but as a purely physical prospect, yeah, that's not a bad comparison. And Drew Brees wasn't a first-round pick.
No, he wasn't
coming out of college either.
He wasn't. So. Yeah, I've got one, but I'm reluctant to say it, so I'll hold it to myself. But at that being said, Billy, how can people follow you? Where can they find your stuff? Get in touch with you, obviously, learn more about Joe Burrow, especially with the college football playoff coming up.
Oh, sure. We're at www.andthevalleyship.com. Today was the first day of the early signing period for recruiting, so we're pretty packed in on that. But we're going to have lots of coverage of the playoffs coming up. And, one of my writers, Seth Galina, is one of the better quarterback breakdown guys on Twitter. If you're a big NFL X&O guy, he's all over Twitter for that. He does a lot of our breakdowns in terms of that kind of stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter at ATVS_Chef Billy.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. I know you had a lot going on, both wrangling the family and doing some other things. I'm sorry I pestered you so much, but greatly appreciate you coming on and making some time for us.
Happy to do it.
All right. Well, enjoy the college football playoff. Go Tigers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And have a good Christmas, man.
Thanks. Y'all have a Merry Christmas too, guys.
All right, take it easy. That was Billy Gomila of SB Nation, SB Nations, and the Valley Shook, their LSU site. Good stuff from him. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting, John, that he talked about how Carson Wentz is not really his comparison of choice. I think Matt Ryan's a positive one. Drew Brees. The one I didn't want to really say, and I'm even hesitating a little bit, but as I've come around a bit more and watched more of Joe Burrow, I see elements of Peyton Manning. I do. I mean, he's got more.
Wow.
He doesn't have the elite arm. He's got the leadership. He's got the headiness. He's got the ability to move in the pocket. I see it. I don't know. I don't think the ceiling's there, but I see elements of him in his play.
It's such a high end comparison because Peyton was the absolute consummate general. The ball was always going to be an accurate spot. It was always going to be where it was supposed to be. He had total complete command of the pocket, and obviously that didn't happen overnight. He had a rough few first 4 years in the NFL before he really exploded. But if what the maximum he could be, yeah, sure. I think the comps that are best right now are like Tony Romo and the Matt Ryan spectrum, where they were never the best. They were never the upper echelon, but they're always teetering in the above average area. You could always win because of them, and they're always efficient at their peak. And I think Romo is going to go down as one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL because he didn't have the greatest postseason success. And I think Ryan's overall reputation would be a lot better had they just beaten the Patriots in that Super Bowl. But both of them were extremely accurate passers. They could manipulate the pocket, and they were just above average for pretty much everything. They didn't have really a standout trait. And I think that is going to be what Joe Burrow's gravestone in terms of a draft prospect is. He's the jack of all trades, but he's above average instead of just good. Not he's not just good at everything. He's pretty good at everything, but doesn't have that elite trait, which I think a lot of people are still backing off on him about because he doesn't have the elite arm or elite athleticism.
Right. And I guess where I'm going with that, and that's why I was reluctant to say that, because I know when you say that name, you're going, but I see elements of it in that Peyton didn't have the Aaron Rodgers arm. He didn't have, he had a good arm, but what he did is he threw to spots. He knew defenses so well in and out, what teams do. He knew his own offense and what they do, their strengths, their weaknesses. He knew that so well and in and out that he had the high completion percentage. He was able to throw to spots and get, throw guys open, if you will, and basically overcompensate for not having the laser arm. He had a good arm. There's no doubt. He had a very good arm, but it wasn't, the wow arm. It was everything else, the intangibles, the intelligence, the maneuvering in the pocket, those kinds of things is what made, really what made Peyton Manning's career what it was. And I see elements of that in Joe Burrow's game.
It's completely fair, and it's the whole thing about comparisons where it's like people want something that compares to their ceiling, what they can hit. It's really just about gauging what they do well, what they don't do well, and putting it into a scope that someone can wrap their head around. And so when people hear Peyton Manning, they're like, oh, well, I don't know about that. So it's more about finding someone where the strengths and weaknesses match, and in a vacuum that does fit Peyton to an extent.
Yeah. Well, thanks to Billy for joining us. He joins us courtesy of SB Nation and their site. So great to have him on to help us learn a bit more about Joe Burrow, as if we haven't been hearing so much about him. But we're getting the inside look as we have on some of these prospects. We will continue our 2020 prospect watch with others coming down the pike. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Get the audio versions of this podcast wherever you get your podcast. You can subscribe to our channels. Please do, including that on YouTube. Get all of the stuff on CincyJungle.com. And get in touch with us if you want. We do listener questions episodes about 2 or 3 times a month, so almost every week. So send those our way if you would like, and try and join us live for every recording of an episode that we do.
So this show is almost to a close, just like this decade is almost to a close. And I haven't done a lot of decade reflection. I don't know about you, Anthony, but I feel like this is a good time to start my Bengals decade reflection. So to close out this show, me and Anthony are going to go rapid fire back and forth, revealing our all 2010s Bengals decade team. And to start for tonight, because we knew we were going to be short on time, we're going to start on the offense, because I don't think there's going to be that much deliberation about who makes this offense team. So I will start at quarterback, AJ McCarron. No, I'm just kidding. Andy Dalton. There's no competition.
Well, there's no competition, and I know he's gotten a lot. He's now in everybody's doghouse, but at least most people's doghouse. But production, starts, for the most part, durability, and the five postseason berths he was a big part of that. You got to have at least a capable quarterback to be able to do that. So, whatever you think about Andy, he set franchise records, and, he was the quarterback of the decade.
You can't talk about the 2010 Bengals without him. And it's more of a legacy thing, but it's like he's one of the top 5 Bengal quarterbacks of all time, and he played most of the decade. So that's it. Who you got running back?
Man. That's a tough one. Because you had a lot of guys that were you had Ced Benson for 2 years. You had Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, I think, for 2 years, maybe 3. You had Gio Bernard, but he was kind of the rotational guy. And then you've only had Mixon for 3. So, some of his, I don't know, man. I'll go. I'll go with Gio, and I'll not only longevity, but I've said this before on this show, and I've written about it. What he does in terms of versatility, and it's not just receiving the ball and running the football. What he does as a pass blocker is often overlooked. He for a smaller guy, he often gets in there, picks up blitzes, and unfortunately, he is forced to do that, especially in recent years, to help a patchwork offensive line. And it's at the sacrifice of some of his statistics, because he can't then go out on a passing route. He's not getting the ball. So, kind of an all-encompassing, though the stats don't show it necessarily. I'll go with Gio.
It's a good one, and it's the one that I heavily considered aside from my other one. So it's kind of interesting how we differed on the Joe Mixon debate, and I'm going to go with Joe Mixon here just because he's the most talented guy. And I think that's number one. That's number one criteria we have for this, at least in my opinion. It's who would you rather build a team around, and the rookie years of Joe Mixon, I think he's shown to be the most talented back that they've had since Corey Dillon. It's fitting because he's number 28 and he's just a do it all back. And just like Gio, there is a sense of him being utilized in the passing game. And something that we don't talk about a lot is the fact that his first 2 years in the NFL, they heavily relied, just like you said, on Gio Bernard in pass protection when he came in on third down, and he's done a great job there. because Joe Mixon was not good at that. He was never good at pass protection in Oklahoma, and in his first 2 years, he was a liability there. He would constantly allow blitz pickups to go through, and he would fail to recognize them from time to time. He was just a liability, and it would force Gio to do more. Over the course of his third season, 2019, he's done a lot better than that. So he is coming together as more of a complete back than he already was. And he's already the most talented back that they've had in a long time. So he's only been here 3 years, and he had a rough start to his rookie year, but he did rebound 2018. He has rebounded in the back half of 2019. So the production is not in terms of volume as much as Gio at this sense, and he has been very volatile, but he is the most talented and he is the most well-rounded. So I'm going to go Joe Mixon.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
What's next?
So you can either do we're just gonna fill out this like a starting offense. So you can go 3 receivers, 1 tight end, or 2 receivers, 2 tight ends. We'll start with the receivers. I'll go with 3, just because I think
let's do that. Let's do it. Kind of a flex. Yeah.
We're going 11 personnel.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do 2 receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. Let's do that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So 2 receivers. AJ Green.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the tough one. I think I'm gonna have to use my flex on a receiver, but to give this receiver his due, I'm gonna go Tyler Boyd. And he was in competition with another receiver, and I'm giving it to Boyd because he came out in his rookie year and he flat out produced. He was very good in 2016. So it's tough for rookie receivers to come in and produce at an efficient rate, and that's what he did over the course of his entire rookie season. There wasn't really a slow start for him. At his second career game against Pittsburgh, I think he had around 70 receiving yards, looked really good, playing it in the stadium that he played in college. And just really took me by surprise because I didn't appreciate the prospect that he was coming out of Pitt. I really underestimated him as a prospect, and he really took me by surprise with how productive and how versatile he was going into this offense. And he had that rough 2017 season, but he proved momentum is real for some prospects. Going in from the second to third year, he really just blew up in 2018. And, with AJ Green beside him, he was his most efficient, but he just thrived in that slot role. And we've seen even more growth and progress in 2019. Unfortunately, hasn't yielded a lot of success. But, when Andy Dolan has been playing well, it's primarily because Tyler Boyd's been getting open and making great catches over the middle. So he's had a very consistent career aside from that lull in 2017. And he's been more of a receiver than I could have ever thought he was coming out of Pitt. So I'll give him the credit he deserves here.
I'm wavering on this one because Boyd, I really like what I've seen out of him over the past couple of seasons, like you mentioned, and really statistically in terms of yardage, he's shown more than another guy I'm thinking of. I'm wavering between he and Marvin Jones. I guess I'll go Boyd reluctantly. I guess I will go Boyd because he has the 1,000-yard season. And more years accrued, especially with Marvin Jones missing 2014. So I'll go with Tyler Boyd somewhat reluctantly, and that's not an indictment of Boyd. It's more of, how I felt about Marvin Jones and his productivity on this team. I wish that was a guy they kept long term, but it would have been great to keep him, Sanu, and even add Boyd to the mix along with Graham. It just would have been great to keep those guys because Jones and Sanu are still producing. So, I'll go with Boyd. I'll agree with you, but Jones is in the discussion for me.
Mm-hmm. So who you got tight end?
So I'm going to go old school with my tight end and flex position. I'm going to use 2 tight ends. So for my flex, I'm going to go Tyler Eifert because he is a versatile guy. He's a guy that, despite all the injuries, he is a threat. He still is a threat. He's a red zone guy. I think he's been underutilized this year, but when he is healthy, he is awesome. This is going to go really unpopular, John. I'm going to be really unpopular.
I know where you're going. I already know.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm going number 84. I'm going Gresham. Couple of Pro Bowls, even though he was kind of, you can laugh at maybe how those were, how those were earned. He had 2 with the Bengals. You got to figure before Jermaine Gresham was drafted in the first round, this team was very tight end averse, at least in the passing game. They had guys like Reggie Kelly. They tried to bring in Brendan Utek. He never did much in terms of because of injuries and whatnot. But so Ben Utek never really worked out. The Bengals needed kind of a security blanket for Carson Palmer. He just a guy that, can block a bit and can do some things in the passing game. I mean, you look 737 yards for a tight end. That's not bad. 15 touchdowns his first 3 years. The problem with him was just the play and clutch time, right? The Houston playoff game where he was supposedly they made him inexplicably the focal point. I never understood that call, and drops and penalties. I get it. He was frustrating, but he was also a productive guy despite that. So I'm going to go flex Tyler Eifert, tight end Jermaine Gresham.
And that was what a lot of Bengals fans wanted when they drafted Eifert, because they already had Gresham. They're like, why are they drafting Eifert? They already have a decent tight end in Gresham. Maybe they're going to utilize what the Patriots are doing with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez and utilize two tight ends at the same time. But unfortunately, that never really worked out. But yeah, my tight end is going to be Eifert. And I know the injuries really diminish his long-term legacy. But again, just in terms of pure talent, in terms of pure all-around ability, he's been their best guy. And I think they've minimized his usage as a run blocker because they don't want to put him in precarious situations. They want to maximize his ability as a receiver and put him in more positions like that. But he's been one of their best run blockers that, over the course of his career in terms of the tight end position. They've heavily relied on CJ Uzomah and Tyler Kroft when he was there in that department, and they never quite did the job that Eifert did. And that was something that was very underrated for him coming out of Notre Dame. Unfortunately, the fluky injuries have completely changed the perception and the plan of attack with him going forward. But when fully utilized, when not worrying about getting injured, he's been one of the more complete tight ends in the NFL. Unfortunately, just not been a lot of seasons for him to prove that. So I'm going to go with Eifert at my tight end, and my flex is going to be Marvin Jones. And primarily because, yes, it was a colossal mistake to let him go in free agency, to not give him the money that he deserves. I don't think he's been injured this year, so he hasn't shown recent memory, but just in the 3 seasons he's been in Detroit, he's been an all-around great guy, an all-around great receiver in that offense to kind of revitalize what Matthew Stafford is. But just like he was that vertical threat. Like it was him, AJ, and Mohamed Sanu, and it was like the revival of the Chad, TJ, and Chris Henry, type era. And Marvin was the Chris Henry guy, but he was so much more than that. He was so much more of a complete receiver, where Henry was just the main vertical threat. Jones had that vertical sense where he could stack the cornerback on the sideline, but he also had the jump ball ability to make contested catches, to go over the middle, and touchdown machine to a certain point. He had a lot of touchdowns in the prime of his Bengals career. The ankle injury in 2014 really hindered his overall production here, but a very talented receiver who was one of the biggest steals that this era of Bengals team has had as a 5th round pick. I think it was the pick that they got when they traded Chad Johnson to the Patriots. So just a great trade-off there. So great, very talented guy, a guy that they should have extended and they should have rewarded, and one of the better receivers of this decade.
Yep, absolutely. Did you do your flex? Yeah. Marvin Jones is your flex, and Eifert's your tight end. Okay, where are we going?
All right, so we're gonna go offensive line, and to make this quick because there's really only so many options, legitimate options that we can go,
especially because of recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about
Bobby Hart's right tackle? We know that.
So we'll just go from left to right, and I'll say a name. I'll say mine. And if you disagree, then go ahead and take it over, because I'll be not mortified, but I'll be a little surprised if you go anything different from left to right. So, all right. Left tackle, Andrew Whitworth.
Well, wait a minute. Just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Left guard, Clint Bowling. Yep. Center, Kyle Cook.
Yep.
We're good there. All right. I was prepared to argue because the recent memory of Kyle Cook was that he really fell apart in 2013. All right. We're good. We're good.
No. I think that unfortunately this position has just been an absolute mess, really, since Rich Bram kind of. I mean, they had Cook. They had Jeff Fain in there for a little bit. Yeah. Remember that? This position, and then we lived through the Bodine era. This position's been kind of a mess. Hopkins has been okay this year. And before that, it's just. Billy Price, another mess. Cook, not an outstanding center, but just me. I mean, if you want to talk about throwback throwback offensive linemen, just mean. Not really overly athletic, but hey, they were productive under him. Especially, Sid Benson had 1,000-yard seasons behind him. They were able to do some things. So yeah, Cook would be my pick there as well.
And I think Hopkins can be better, but when Cook was good, he was an above average center. And
yeah.
It was unfortunate how his career ended and how fans were so relieved when they got rid of him for Bodine and how that's turned out. But yeah, he deserves recognition for here. So Cook at center, right guard Kevin Zeiler, another guy that shouldn't leave. Right tackle Andre Smith.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean that's, and if you actually think about. For a while, when you have Andrew Whitworth, Clint Bowling, Kevin Zeitler, and a top end, in his prime, Andre Smith on that offensive line playing at the same time, that's a pretty damn good line, man.
It was really good. And
the fact that they allowed that thing to deteriorate and nosedive after, and granted, Smith was up there in age, so you're going to have to cycle him out. Whitworth was getting up there in age, but he wasn't showing signs of slowing down, but they moved on from him, and it's been a mess. You hope that Glenn, Jonah Williams, and others can kind of pick up the pieces next year, but it has not been the same. And really, that 2015 line was pretty dang good when you had those four guys really playing at a really high level.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's more of the fact that they didn't re-sign most of those guys, or the fact that the replacements were just so bad and they did a poor job of drafting and developing. Because honestly, like you can look at it's the worst of both worlds, because a lot of people will say that retaining specific individual offensive linemen doesn't do you that good and keeping the whole group at a competent rate. But at the same time, you have to be able to replace guys and find guys in the draft that are capable of coming in, and they just did the worst job possible of that. So it was it was either just pay the money to Whitworth and Zeiler, or make sure your replacements are good. And they did neither. And that's why they ended up in the spot.
Yeah, I'm hoping, and I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I'm hoping we can get a certain former Bengals offensive line coach on the show sometime soon and talk about that. That would be a very interesting conversation with him. So maybe we'll do that. We've had his protege Willie Anderson on the show, so maybe we'll get the old coach on there. So who else? Did we miss anybody? Fullback? We didn't do fullback. Did we?
That could have been our flex. They had a fullback since Jeremy? They had James Conner and Orson Charles. That was it. Not really.
I mean, bunch of Hewitt. They had an H back.
Yeah, that's true.
And Jake Fisher.
Yeah.
No, I think we did. We got through all of it. So, there's your all-decade team. Not too shabby especially when you kind of cherry pick a little bit.
That's an offense that Andy Dalton can thrive under. That's for sure.
Yep. I guess next week we'll do defense, right, or special teams, or both. Or how do you want it? This is your baby, dude. So how do you want to do it?
I feel like we can combine them. Special teams probably shouldn't take too long, but the defense, I feel like we're going to get into more of a discussion in terms of who makes that team still. That'll be interesting.
But yeah, especially in the back seven, I think that'll be really interesting. So, I think we should maybe combine it, especially since the new year. It'll be the last show before the new year. We should do it. Well, we thought we'd get done a little quicker than we did this week, but hey, we were quicker. We were shorter this week than we were last week. Last week was a long show, but this was a great episode. This was actually a really fun episode. Talking Joe Burrow, talking Joe Mixon, talking Bengals all-decade team. Really fun stuff. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. As I mentioned a couple of times during the show, get the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Megaphone, wherever you get your audio podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave a rating for us if you can. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our videos. It's not just us and our weekly show, our listener questions and post-game reactions that are on our YouTube channel. Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk is also on our YouTube channel. And we also have Orange is the New Black, a podcast that's on the SB Nation slate of podcasts on their channel. So check out all the stuff we're putting out there for you guys. It's been a lot. John, Merry Christmas, man.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays to all of our listeners.
Yeah.
We could not do this without you. I love seeing the engagement on the live comments on the side. And I don't always agree with you guys. I don't always Find your comments funny, even though they're supposed to be. But I love every single one of you. Whatever holiday you guys are celebrating, have a great end of 2019.
Yep. To totally agree with those sentiments. I love the name. By the way, there's a guy, there's a person in our live YouTube chat called Butt Hurt, and it's BUTTHERT. I mean, that's just amazing. But he does say Merry Christmas. So Merry Christmas back at you. And Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it may be that you are celebrating. Enjoy the holiday season. Do me a favor and try not to drive like a maniac. Today, maybe it's just Southern California, man. Oh my gosh.
It's definitely so there.
Oh my gosh. The drivers are just morons. Today was like almost in 4 accidents. Ridiculous. That's my PSA. Anything else before we get out of here, John?
There's a game on Sunday, I guess. They're calling it the Burrow Bowl.
I guess, I mean, there's not much to talk about on that, I guess, as we preview. We wanted to talk a little bit more. I mean, we could have talked about the Bengals getting their butts handed to them by the Patriots and, all of that, but we figured we'd take a little bit of a different angle on this week's show. Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, the Burrow Bowl coming up here.
Go Dolphins, question mark?
Yeah. I mean, I don't. It depends on where you're at with that. I don't know. Ideally, I'd like to see the Bengals, obviously win out, but still maintain that first overall pick. If that the chances of that are a bit low, but stranger things have happened. I don't like rooting against them per se, but if Joe Burrow is indeed a franchise-changing player, you got to do what you can to get that guy. I will say that the Bengals can lose draft positioning. I want to, in case Mike Brown's listening out there somewhere, you can lose draft positioning and still move up and get a guy you want. That is a thing that is allowed in the NFL draft, in case you were wondering. Bengals don't like to do that, though.
No.
Well, enjoy this weekend, John. I know you've got a lot going on. I do as well, but enjoy some of the pre-holiday festivities and into the holidays. Just programming note for all of you, we will obviously not be recording our show on the usual Wednesday of next week because that is Christmas night. I think we've decided on Thursday night, right, John?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll be doing it Thursday night, the 26th. So please join us then. And we'll see you in all the ways that we record. If not, download the program afterwards. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And our thanks to Billy Gomila of And the Valley Shook, the SB Nation's LSU blog. Thanks, guys. Happy holidays.